Hello there. Welcome back to ExamPadi. Today's topic is Military Role in Nigeria Part 2. And in this lesson we will 1. Discuss the reason for military intervention, where we'll be looking at military rule from 1985 to 1993 and 1993 to 1999. Number 2. Highlight the features of military rule in Nigeria. 3. Outline the consequences of military rule. And 4. Discover ways to prevent military intervention in governments. Let's begin with military rule in Nigeria from 1985 to 1993. The bloodless coup that took place on 27 August 1985 brought in Major General, later referred to as General Ibrahim Babangida, as head of state, later President and Commander-in-Chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces. Babangida retained most of the personnel of the Buhari regime in one form or another. The reasons for the 1985 coup is as follows. General Babangida accused the Buhari regime of failing to revamp the national economy that had declined so much during the civilian rule of 1979 to 1983. Babangida also complained of massive fraud in the issuance of import licenses and counter-trade agreements. Let us explore the structure of the Babangida government. The Supreme Headquarters, which was the seat of government, was renamed the General Staff Headquarters, and the position of the Chief of Staff, Supreme Headquarters, was also renamed Chief of General Staff. The Chief of General Staff no longer had control over the armed forces, but was made to handle only political issues detailed to his desk. The Supreme Military Council, SMC, became the Armed Forces Ruling Council, AFRC. The AFRC was a supreme body with Babangida as president. The AFRC performed executive and legislative functions. The AFRC consisted of the president as the chairman, chief of general staff, later vice presidents, service chiefs, divisional commanders, defense minister who also became the chairman of the newly created Joint Chief of Staff, the Inspector General of Police, and the Attorney General of the Federation. The Federal Executive Council was renamed the National Council of Ministers, NCM. Its membership was enlarged to 22 from 18 of the previous regime with its own secretary. In the council was the head of state as chairman, chief of general staff, minister of defense, service chiefs, the Inspector General of Police, Attorney General, and Minister of Justice and other ministers. The Council performed administrative and executive functions. The Council of State was made up of the Head of State as Chairman and the Chief of General Staff, Minister of Defense, Service Chiefs, the Inspector General of Police, the Attorney General, and Minister of Justice, former Heads of State, and all military governors. The Council was to coordinate and harmonize the work of the various state governments and of the federal military government. The secretary to the military government was the head of public service. Directors General replaced the permanent secretaries by the 1998 Civil Service Reform, and the Directors General became political appointees. The judiciary remained the same as in the civilian era, with the Chief Justice as head. There were also various tribunals which had judges and military officers as members. Some of the achievements of the Babangida administration includes the following. Number 1. Upon assumption of power, this regime abrogated the unpopular Decree Number 2 and then promised to reorganize the Nigerian Security Organization. Many detained people regained their liberty. Number 2. The Structural Adjustment Program, SAP, was introduced to restructure and diversify the economy in order to promote the production of other goods for export and reduce the dependence on a single product, oil. Number 3. The notorious import license system was abolished and the naira achieved a realistic value. Number 4. The civil service was reformed, including the replacement of permanent secretaries with directors general. Number 5. There was commercialization and privatization of many parastatals in order to enhance their efficiency and productivity. Number 6. The regime established the People's Bank and community banks to help the poor in both urban and rural areas. Number 7. The mass transit program was set up to ease transportation problems of Nigerian citizens in all parts of the Federation. Number 8. The program Better Life for Rural Women was established to improve the lot of women. Number 9. A new population census was carried out, even if its results were contested as those of all earlier censuses in Nigeria. And number 10. 2 states were created in 1987 and 9 states in 1991, bringing the number of states to 30. On the other hand, let's look at the failures of the Babangida administration. Number 1. The regime was characterized by a high level of indiscipline and corruption, where disorderliness and corruption in public conduct and uncleanliness in most urban and rural streets was prevalent. Number 2. Incidents of armed drug pushing by Nigerians became rampant, and there arose drug barons who became emergency millionaires and flaunted their ill-gotten wealth. Number 3. Most of the bodies established and generously funded by the Babangida regime later became avenues for the self-enrichment of a few. For example, People's Bank and the Better Life for Rural Women scheme, and so on. Number 4. There was no accountability in public office, while bribery and corruption seemed to have been institutionalized. And number 5. There was little respect for popular opinion. For instance, none of the many political associations freely formed by Nigerians was registered as a political party. Instead, the government formed 2 parties, the National Republican Convention (NRC) and the Social Democratic Party (SDP), which all interested politicians were required to join. The next military administration we'll be looking at is the Abacha administration from 1993 to 1999. General Sani Abacha came to power on the 17th November 1993, having forced Chief Ernest Shonekan to resign as the head of the interim national government. General Abacha was the Secretary of Defense in the same administration. On assumption of office, he dissolved the national and state assemblies, relieved elected state governors and their executive councils of their positions, and also dissolved the various local government councils. It disbanded the existing 2 political parties, SDP and NRC, and established a new transition program to return the country to civil rule on October 1, 1998. Let us explore the structure of the Abacha administration. The Provisional Ruling Council (PRC) was the highest organ of government, and it comprised of the head of state as chairman and the chief of general staff, Lieutenant General Oladipo Diya, as vice chairman. It included the service chiefs, chief of army staff, chief of air staff, chief of naval staff, inspector general of police, and the chief of defense staff. Other members of the body were the general officers commanding military divisions and some other top military and police officers. The civilian members were the Attorney General, and Minister of Justice, and the Secretary to the federal government. The PRC was vested with legislative and executive powers. The PRC ratified the appointment of judges, ambassadors, state military governors and administrators, federal ministers, as well as approved the budgetary estimates of both the federal and state governments. Next was the Council of Ministers, which comprised of both civilian and military members, with the head of state as chairman. There was the National Council of States, comprising the head of state as chairman, with the Chief of General Staff, service chiefs, and military administrators as members. What were the achievements of the Abacha administration? Number 1. The administration brought relative peace, law and order, and stability in the exchange rates of the naira. Number 2. It appointed important figures from all sectors of the country as ministers, and it organized a constitutional conference that drew up the draft of a new constitution. Number 3. The administration introduced relief packages for workers and encouraged free enterprise and the creation of a conducive atmosphere for foreign investments. Number 4. In 1996, Abacha's regime created 6 states, which were Ekiti, Ebonyi, Zamfara, Nasarawa, Kebbi, and Bayelsa. Number 5, it created the Federal Character Commission to address the imbalance in federal appointments. Number 6, the Petroleum Trust Fund was created to fund road construction, drug supply to hospitals, and infrastructure development. Number 7, the Education Tax Fund was created to use the 2% service charge from quoted companies to support development. Number 8, it also created the Committee on Devolution of Power to divide powers between the states, federal and local governments. And number 9, the National Reconciliation Committee, headed by Chief Alex Akinyele, was created to attempt to resolve various conflicts in the country. What were the failures of the Abacha's government? Number 1, Abacha's regime became dictatorial, thereby paying very little attention to the constitution. Number 2, the regime introduced ouster clauses to restrain the judiciary from adjudicating on matters in which the government was involved. Number 3, at some points, the regime had conflicts with the trade unions, student unions, and so on, which led to prolonged strikes and closure of universities. Number 4, the economy became paralyzed with shortages of essential goods and commodities. Number 5, there were bomb blasts in several parts of the country. Number 6, some prominent Nigerians suspected to be anti-Abacha were detained without trial, and some were reportedly assassinated. Number 7, members of National Democratic Coalition, NADECO, who were pro-democracy activists, fled into exile. Number 8, the regime appointed military officers without laid-down procedures. This created widespread dissatisfaction within the rank and file of the military. Number 9, Abacha's second-in-command, Lieutenant General Oladipo Oduya, was accused of treason and saved from being executed when Abacha died suddenly. And number 10, Abacha and his associates reportedly looted the national treasury and stashed huge loot abroad. The last military regime in Nigeria was the General Abdulsalam Abubakar regime. General Abdulsalam Abubakar became the head of state and commander-in-chief of the armed forces following the death of General Sani Abacha on 8 June 1998. Before this date, he was the Chief of Defense Staff and a member of the Provisional Ruling Council, PRC. General Abubakar terminated the 3-year transition program, which General Abacha initiated in 1995, and in its place initiated a 10-month transition program that would return the nation to civil rule on 29 May 1999. Let's analyze the structure of the Abubakar regime. The Provisional Ruling Council, PRC, remained the highest policy-making organ of the government, with the head of state as chairman. Admiral Mike Ahigbe, the Chief of General Staff, was the vice chairman. Other members were the Chief of Army Staff, the Chief of Air Staff, the Chief of Naval Staff, the Inspector General of Police, and Divisional Commanders. The achievements of the Abubakar regime includes the following. Number 1. General Abubakar successfully conducted the transition to civil rule and handed over power to a popularly elected government. Number 2. He supervised a short and successful transition program of 10 months. Number 3. The government set up a review panel for the 1995 Constitution. Number 4. The Electoral Commission, INEC, offered provisional registration to 9 political parties, out of which 3 of them, namely AD, APP, and PDP, were registered. Number 5. INEC, under Justice Ephraim Akpata, conducted elections into local governments, state houses of assembly, National Assembly, and presidency. Number 6. The government recovered some money which some officials of the previous government had embezzled. Number 7. A measure of professionalism was returned to the armed forces. Number 8. The positive role of the military in a democracy was emphasized. Number 9. The country witnessed relative peace as political assassinations of opponents of the government, arson, and bomb blasts were absent. And number 10. The government released political detainees incarcerated by the Abacha administration. The failures of Abubakar regime includes the following. Number 1. The constitution was hastily produced. Number 2. The constitution contained so many ambiguities and contradictions. Number 3. The constitution ignored the fundamental issues of federalism. Number 4. The government could not alleviate the economic difficulties facing the nation. For example, shortage of fuel and depreciation of the naira. Number 5. The foreign policy lacked vibrancy and dynamism. Number 6. The government could not eliminate corruption among officials of the government. Number 7. It failed to take crucial decisions on many matters. For example, it failed to release Chief Moshood Abiola from detention, from where he eventually died. And number 8, the administration was considered very weak. Let's discuss the consequences of military rule. Number 1, keeping the country together. The first major effect of military rule in Nigeria was the keeping of the country together as one geographical entity. Number 2, maintenance of peace. Since the end of the Civil War, the reign of the military in Nigeria has been that of peace and unity, which has created fertile ground for national development, rather than dissipation of energy on political rivalry, vain propaganda, and fanning of embers of tribalism, as was the case during the dancing days of politics in the First and Second Republics. Number 3, creation of states. Nigeria was divided into 12 states on May 27, 1967, and 19 states on February 3, 1976 by Gowon and Murtala administrations respectively. General Babangida between 1987 and 1991 created 11 states, and General Abacha in 1996 created additional 6 states. these states have contributed immensely to bringing the government and development nearer to the people. Number 4. Corruption. The military boys that came to power in order to correct the civilians of their corrupt practices also indulged in the same acts. Number 5. The Civil War. The Civil War, which took place in Nigeria between 1967 and 1970, in which millions of Nigerians and property worth millions of naira were destroyed, can be attributed to the military. That war could have been averted if the military had displayed good diplomacy and sound political maturity. Number 6. Violation of fundamental human rights. The military administrations in Nigeria, no matter how humane, indulge in denying the citizen their fundamental human rights. People are detained with impunity without trial. What are the features of military rule in Nigeria? Number 1. The suspension and modification of some sections of the Constitution to be in line with the military rule. Number 2. It brought about a dictatorial form of government and a highly centralized system of governance. Number 3. Rule with decrees and absence of all forms of opposition. Number 4. Fusion of legislative and the executive arms of government. Number 5. Inclusion of civilians in the administration. Number 6. The use of coercion in the implementation of policies and absence of election. Number 7. Closure of the country borders, seas and airports when military first came to power. Number 8. Imposition of dusk to dawn curfew whenever the military take over power in a country. How can we prevent military intervention in governments? Number 1. The rulers and the ruled should comply with the Constitution's provisions. Number 2. There should be peaceful resistance to any attempt to impose military administration on the people. Number 3. Military rule should be outlawed in the Constitution, and all elected officials should display the attributes of good leadership. Number 4. Political education should be carried out to sensitize the masses and the armed forces on the merits of democracy. Number 5. The judiciary should be independent, courageous, free, and fair in performing their duties. Number 6. Bribery, corruption, and financial mismanagement should be eliminated from public service, and offenders should be exposed and punished according to the law. Number 7. Politicians should not interfere with the affairs of the military, and members of the armed forces should not openly or secretly belong to political parties. Number 8. Civilians should reject political appointments from the military. Number 9. Politicians should be accountable to the electorate and act in a noble manner. Number 10. Politicians should play the game of politics according to the laid down rules and regulations and accept defeat during elections. And 11. Politicians should implement their electioneering promises to the people. We have come to the end of this lesson. Attempt these questions to evaluate yourself. Number 1. Highlight the military structure in Nigeria. Number 2. State 5 consequences of military rule in Nigeria. And number 3. List 5 ways on how to prevent military intervention in government. Thank you for learning about military rule in Nigeria part 2 with me today. I'll see you in our next video. Bye for now.